morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. Today we'll be talking about one of our newest parks we visited.
A new fave.
That's Six Flags Great America in Illinois, Gurnee, Illinois. Really close to
Chicago and Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Places. Milwaukee, a city that people from Europe would be like, what's that?
And we stayed in a hotel in Waukegan.
And we saw my BFF Keegan
in Waukegan
from college. So we saw
close to Milwaukee.
Keegan in Waukegan.
It all kind of added up. Anyway, what we're going to be talking about today is this kind of. What is the title you came up with?
This park
really
was like really high on your American Parks bucket list for a long time.
It was like the last major
It was the
theme park I
last
hadn't hit
major,
yet.
and like I hadn't been in 10 years, so like there were expectations, good and bad, and middle ground. And we wanted to talk about like the setup for this is I wanted to talk to Sean about his analysis of the park based on where his expectations were for everything in this park, especially when you consider like how much you've done as an enthusiast and the places that you've traveled by the time you finally got to Six Flags Great America, which is a park that everyone in the Midwest goes to usually pretty early in their roller coaster enthusiast careers. So
yeah, so I guess today we'll be kind of doing interview style, a little different than usual, where we're going to find out what was my expectation and what did I like, what did I not like, that sort of thing. Before we do that, a quick shout out to some new articles on thecoasterkings.com. Of course, there is the Ride to Happiness by Tomorrowland article that Sven has created, the newest Mac Extreme spinner located at Plopsaland de Panne.
amazing.
We're actually going to write that. By the time you hear this, maybe like next week, we're not really sure when we're launching this because it's time sensitive. But also go to the website and check out the Six Flags Great America article that's going to kind of talk about what we talk about today, but in more detail. And, of course, our newest Six Flags Parks ranked article, which ranks, well, you figured it out, all Six Flags Parks.
Yeah.
So that's
all 15 regular, traditional Six Flags parks.
Not including water
tiers.
parks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're doing that. And, of course, there'll be lots and lots of new content coming, especially after our little Europe trip. It's going to be a quick one where we're trying to hit like 8 or 9 parks. It's going to be pretty crazy. So we're looking forward to that. We just got our tickets.
We're flying confirmed instead of having standby, which just feels like when you're... All my airline peeps know that, like, using confirmed airfare that your company has gifted you is, like, it's a real treat. Like, it's a real privilege.
We weren't sure we were going to use it because we had the opportunity to use it later in life as well. But we figured with the pandemic and I haven't been out in a minute and flights being kind of uncertain
and
having to get tested.
With the testing.
And there's, like, a lot of things we got to get done. And we have, like, appointments set up in France to get tested on the way back to get back to the United States. So to do that, we're actually flying
now
confirmed.
Now has never been the better time than to fly confirmed. And, it's been a hard 18 months. Like, I think we deserve it.
The fun thing
Everyone
is that
deserves it.
Right as the pandemic kind of, like, took off in the West, took off, like, it's a good thing. Anyway, we went to Disneyland Paris, like, late February of 2020.
We were there February 29th, my 5-year work anniversary.
And Italy had already shut down, and then the UK shut down all schools, and our family was like, what the hell are you doing overseas? And we're like, well, this is sort of my hometown, so, like, I'm not really that concerned about it. If I'm going to get stuck here, at least I'm in Europe.
Yeah, says the guy with the European passport.
And that was the last thing we did, and we flew back, and then, the Disney park shut shortly after, and that was that. And so what we're going to do to kind of celebrate our first return back internationally is we're going to go to Disneyland Paris.
We're coming full circle.
First thing we're doing is we're going to like land this plane, we're going to hop off, and then we're going to go straight into the train to Disneyland Paris.
The last thing we did internationally was ride Hyperspace Mountain, so that will be the first thing that we do internationally.
Hopefully, if it's not finicky.
If it decides to cooperate.
If it decides to,
you just never know.
If there happens to be a Star Destroyer in Jakku, then we're in luck.
We're going to find out.
All right. Without further ado, let's jump into today's topic.
Okay, so the reason... One of the fun things about approaching this park in sort of like a methodical way like this instead of... Because like we could go through it the way that we do when we talk about how our day went. But I think for this park...
That was a lot of running around, I guess.
Yeah, for us it was... We had 2 days and they were awesome and we rode lots of rides. We'd budgeted so much time just in case like Max Force was difficult or operations were bad. And actually, Max Force was consistent. Operations were wonderful. We never waited more than half an hour for literally anything. We didn't need to buy Fastlane. Like we did, it was
or Flash Pass.
It was literally so idyllic. And so even though we had like conquered the park by day 1, day 2 was just like so relaxing and so cathartic. And I was like,
another nice thing is that as a VIP Diamond Elite Six Flags pass holder, because member, because I decided to like not deal with like trying to not pay my pass for a year because the pandemic.
We got bonus.
We got like
passes.
4 total flash passes per day, which is nice. Yeah, just for existing.
Also on day 1, we had Ian with us. We finally met our beloved Ian correspondent.
You may know him from the miniseries of Minisodes, which will make a return at one point, but not yet.
He's our one of our West Coast historians. As huge fans of California's Great America, all 3 of us, from different eras, calling California's Great America a home park of sorts. And this was yours and Ian's first visit to Six Flags Great America and my first visit in 10 years. And so we just were like
fanboying, like
analyzing
to the death. It was like
in the similarities. Like we were just talking.
God, if anyone had recorded us for those 12 hours, it would have been the nerdiest
we were just talking
recording
nonstop.
ever. Yeah,
like it was constant chatter about similarities and like the Marriott.
Which is also, I think, why we're not really going to do like a California's Great America versus Six Flags Great America thing here, because they've already talked about it so much.
Really, it's like. Yeah, you asked me earlier today, like, which one would I choose? And honestly...
I keep asking that question because my answer is not clear.
I pick both because they're so different. Like, I don't think it's obvious one way or the other because you go to different parts for different reasons. You go to these parks for different reasons. These parks unlock different parts of my heart in different ways. So deep. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, the way we wanted to go through this episode is because we think the park is so clever with its whole, like, layout. I think we just should go clockwise. Starting.
So instead of hot or not, we're going to be like expectation met or not met.
Expectation versus reality.
Cool. Let's start with the first ride.
And we're going to start with the roller coaster. And it actually works out perfectly because the ride that we cared about the least is up first. And the ride that I think anyone that knows the map knows what the first ride is. Yeah. Well,
because it can be the other one.
Yeah. So, we're finishing with Max Force because
we're starting with Superman.
We're starting with Superman because Max Force was super high expectations and very much curiosity, and Superman was like, if we miss it, we miss it. And we ended up using one of our exit passes to get the credit, and I'm really glad we did because Superman...
one of our flash passes.
Pretty much just runs with one train because it takes too long to dispatch, and like people are sitting in the brake run like getting neck cramps and stuff, and I think that's just how they're like, doing it company-wide. But yeah, so... what were your expectations for Superman Ultimate Flight?
Well, given this is the third one, my expectations were literally like the other two. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, they're not terrible rides, but they don't really stand out. I definitely much prefer the Vekoma Flying Dutchman, generally speaking.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess coming from Vekoma fan, I think layout-wise, they just do they just do more.
It's Batwing for me.
So my expectations were that it's going to be like the One Good Adventure, really.
And then, how was the ride?
Ride itself, I would say... maybe below Georgia because it doesn't have the tunnel and like the hillside. Yeah. But above Great Adventure because unlike Great Adventure where it's honestly just on a flat piece of grass, there was actually trees. The landscaping was nice. The entrance to the ride is kind of cool. Like it has a nice presence and the shopway plot. It does have a nice presence. So, I mean, again, this is like the one ride I really couldn't give a flying shit around.
Like, really, I guess no pun intended. We don't give a flying fuck about Superman.
Yeah, so pretty much, it was a one and done.
For me,
just waiting like 3-4 trains using flash pass is already like agonizing.
Yeah.
So that is probably going to be the most negative ride experience I've had, even though there was nothing wrong with it. It was just not...
I would say that like thing, I was horrified at the length of the line and looking at
the line was at least 2 hours.
And then when we went the next morning and we started in that corner of the park and we saw the enormous line of people waiting to rope drop that ride, I'm like, wow, there's a culture surrounding this ride.
Well, people know it's going to be the longest.
People know it's the Crush's coaster of this park. It's like people.
What's surprising to me is that they were giving Flash Pass to
the fact that we were able to use
because they rotate Flash Pass daily depending on how busy it is and what rides are running how many trains. And somehow they were giving it to Superman, and I'm pretty confident Superman should have like not had it available.
Yeah, the fact that, like,
but I'll take it. You know,
the
thanks
line
for the ride.
for Max Force was longer than Superman. That's how crazy. Max Force was shorter. Superman had the longest, maybe not necessarily the longest physical line, but certainly
even
the longest
physically,
duration.
I think it was the longest.
But physically,
line
certainly,
it was long.
But yeah, I guess for me, it was nice to see how the trees had grown in. When I rode it, the ride was 10 years old. Now it's almost 20 years old. And so the landscaping has grown in. It was way nicer than I remember. But then it was like, it was it was pure incident that we wrote it, and so we went, we came, we saw, we got the credit, we left.
Bye.
More importantly, Condor, which sits in front of Superman, was taunting us on
First day
one.
it wasn't running. Second day, luckily,
And then
it
our
was.
second day, which was our first wedding anniversary, Condor graced us with its presence.
Did a heckin' wake up for us.
Yeah, it was our. We like to think it was our little first wedding anniversary present. Was we got to ride Condor,
which is the 5th country of condors for me.
Yeah, you've ridden Condors
in Hong Kong, Japan, Netherlands, Canada,
and
US,
the United States.
That's not wild.
And I haven't ridden one in the Netherlands because I have not. Is that your Condor impression?
It is my Condor
I still need to ride the one at Slagharen. But I rode the Condor. I rode the Condor at Belantis.
I'm at this point the kind of guy who would literally go to Slagharen.
And I rode
just to ride
one in Hungary. So we
are there any in Belgium?
I don't think so.
That'd be cute.
Yeah, that would be cute.
Bellavarda would be a place.
Oh, in Mexico. I rode the one in Mexico that Indiana Beach now has. So hopefully Gene Stapleton. I don't know if he's not necessarily setting up all of his acquisitions in Indiana Beach now that he owns 3 parks.
Oh, true.
He says he might send the shuttle loop to Clementon.
Oh, okay.
Clementon. So who knows where that Condor will materialize? But either way, I think it's in good hands. But yeah, so the Condor met your expectations.
It sure did.
Maybe not the most thrilling ride.
I mean, every time I ride one, it gets smaller.
Yeah,
especially when you're talking about American regional parks.
Yeah.
Where American regional parks just have the average largest coasters in the world. They're always massive coasters next to like Condors, which as a kid I believe Condors are big shit. But I guess the more I travel, the smaller they get in my head.
When you grow up with Condors, the older you get, the smaller they seem to get. I always remember Condors as being like giant observation tower type rides, but they're really only like 50 feet. They're
really not that
They're
big.
like a standard like vertical, like a traveling vertical swing ride height. But yeah, that was so amazing that it opened for us. That's our favorite flat. That's my favorite flat. I'm pretty sure it's yours too.
Yeah.
So that was amazing. The Dark Knight, which is a lovely little compliment to Superman. You have ridden The Dark Knight at Six Flags Great Adventure first.
Yes.
So based on those rides, and based on like another heavily themed indoor Wild Mouse experience that we had a couple weeks ago with Exterminator at Kennywood, what were your expectations for this particular Dark Knight coaster?
Stuff like Clones, it's going to go back just to like Great Adventure. I'm like, well, it's going to be like Great Adventures. I liked it better because they took the old theater and used it as queue, which I would never want to wait in that because it's way too much queue for me. But
Theater Royale.
So that was cool. And then the ride itself, it was well maintained, ran well. All the effects are working.
It was running fast.
It was not trimmed. Overall, these are really good rides. I wish more Seagrass parks had it. I always say Magic Mountain needs one.
Magic Mountain
because I would love an indoor coaster at Magic Mountain and like something like the Dark Knight.
Yeah, we talked
tucked
about
away
that
next to Batman would be a great fit.
In our like new links when we were talking about like what could possibly benefit Magic Mountain, something that they don't already have, and it's like, well, yeah, if they could find a useful place to put a show building, like maybe somewhere like over by Scream and Batman, you know, drop a Dark Knight coaster in there.
So yeah, I like that a lot.
We wrote it. We wrote it. We liked it enough to write it again.
Guilty pleasure. Yeah, I like it.
We wrote it twice. I mean, we had a lot of time. We had 2 days.
We like rope dropped it one day.
Yeah, that was actually
done. Yeah, but I loved it.
Because we saw Condor testing.
Oh,
we wanted to see if Condor was going to open with the park. So we wanted to be there, and that was how we got to see how crazy the line was for Superman at rope drop. But yeah, we didn't bother with like rope dropping anything like substantial on day 2. We were just there to like enjoy the park in the wee hours of the morning, and we made our way leisurely through Orleans Place and up through Mardi Gras, which Mardi Gras is the only area of the park we didn't ride anything in that area because right now they only have 2 attractions. Mardi Gras Hangover was closed, which we probably would have ridden it for the heck of it. Oh, and the balloons. It's the balloon ride. The Rapids ride, yeah, I guess technically they have 3 rides, but the Rapids ride is more than closed. It's like gone. They've taken the signage down. It looks like it hasn't been touched in like at least 2 years. I think the app says that it's coming soon.
Well, I did see the boats wrapped like on the ride, so I guess that maybe they will be opening.
The Rapids rides were wrapped.
Yeah,
the wrapping of the Rapids, and then you have a beautiful compliment. Like I don't know if they were really like this. Seems like a really clever thing for them to have done, but the placement of the Joker free spin, which is the same Joker free spin that we have at all the others, except that this one is the border between the Mardi Gras area of the park and Yankee Harbor, and Joker automatically has Mardi Gras colors, purple and green. So even though this ride isn't in the Mardi Gras section, I mean, they could have put it in there if they wanted to, but they used the old East River crawler plot as like the entrance and overflow queue area.
One thing I found smart about Joker is that they really played the two sides game very well here.
Yeah.
It was the hashtag green side, hashtag purple side. And like they had custom signs for it, and they really made a point of making people ride twice so they could experience both sides. And obviously, like, their flipping is different.
One side is like the Yankee Harbor side, and one side's the Mardi Gras side. I just think it's like for all of the free spins, this one really complements.
It fit in really nicely, especially located like touching Batman pretty much because it's so close.
Yeah, the entrance
it worked really well.
Was probably dictated by its proximity to Batman because obviously they're a great complement together. But I just can't get over how clever the color component is for the Mardi Gras area. It's like, even though it's not a Mardi Gras ride, it's definitely the focal point of the Mardi Gras section.
Totally.
And matches, Mardi Gras.
Well, yeah, because the Midway approach it head on, and then you kind of have to circumnavigate it.
And yeah, kudos to like the little covered bridge walkway that was the original entrance to Yankee Harbor from New Orleans. They rescued it and moved it clear across the Midway to accommodate the Joker coaster. This park takes really good care of some of this like old like Marriott era infrastructure. They take the themed areas of the park very seriously. Even if the rides aren't necessarily explicitly themed to the area, all the signage, all of the like entryways and transitions between areas, all the signage is maintained, and the little covered bridges and stuff, and the shops and the arcades. Like, if there's a arcade in Yankee Harbor, like, you know it. You know that the sign says Yankee Harbor Arcade. Like, they really want people to be conscientious of the themed areas that we're in.
Which is funny because there's a lot of bleeding in the park. Yeah. Like, it's not perfect. But let's talk Joker.
Yeah, okay.
Expectations. I was expecting a Joker like New England or Great Adventure, which I really don't care for the Six Flags Free Flies. I think
this and Superman were the only major coasters that we only rode once because we've ridden.
I like Batman at Fiesta Texas a lot. I really like Arashi at Nagashima Spaland.
Yeah.
But once you've ridden Arashi, everything feels so mild, and to the point where if it doesn't flip enough, you just kind of hang in your restraint and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward.
Having said that, we rode Purple Side.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we went around.
I liked it.
We were under
better.
Batman. We were admiring Batman's little infield.
It was better than I expected.
We got a good ride on it.
I would probably say I like it as much as the one in Fiesta Texas. So it's middle of the pack for me, but better than the other Jokers I've ridden.
Yeah, solid. Got a solid ride on it.
So overall, yeah, I like the views of it. It did enough flipping for me to not be hanging in my restraint half the time. And every time I ride one of those things, I do get kind of nervous because at the end of the day, they're pretty intense, and you never really know where they're going to flip to. Unlike X2, where I know exactly what's going to happen every second.
True. Yeah, there's something more.
Like nothing freaks me out about like Ishinika or Daimakonda.
Because you just know.
Because I know the layout and I know what's going to happen.
You can anticipate it.
But it's the free spins where no ride is really necessarily the same. So.
And also the time of day that we rode it. It was pretty late in the day when we got.
Our
we
Batman,
we got our Joker credit because it was sort of one of those things, and like we had been up all day and we'd ridden all these rides, and Joker like wore me out, I guess, based on like my energy level and how intense it was. And then there's Batman the ride, the OG Batman.
Talk about how intense it was.
So
Batman is intense as hell.
Were obviously high because like all Batman clones are good rides.
You can really notice that this Batman is very tight. The OG, there is a little bit of. Because it was so snugly fit on the Midway here, you can really sense that it is a tighter layout. It was very prototypey. It's not as tall, but God, I don't think my feet hurt on Batman clones. I don't think my feet has ever hurt that much on a Batman clone.
That's 10 feet shorter, but yeah, the squirreliness of this Batman is beyond compare. I mean, it just
feels even tighter. And then there's all the landscaping, natural landscaping.
The landscaping, what they had to do to accommodate this ride layout. This is the only Batman clone where you really appreciate why the layout exists. Because even though the other Batmans make great use of the space that they have, I mean, this thing, even though some of the rides, like the Cajun Cliffhanger, Chance Rotor, for example, which were part of what dictated the ride's layout, even though some of these rides aren't there anymore, its proximity to newer rides like the Whirligig, well, I guess the Whirligig's not new, but they relocated the Whirligig to accommodate V2. That's their Zero Wave Swinger ride. It's right there in front of the Batman, and you've got Joker right there. You've got the center, the alleyway, the center artery for the park on the other side. I mean, This thing is jammed in there, and clearances you get with the water and the tree line and stuff in the back side of Batman is just like, it's incredible. It really is like the strongest of the Batman coasters, I think, because of the water and plant foliage on the back half.
Yeah, I think the funniest thing was that in the station they were playing a animation of Batman Dark Knight at Six Flags in England, which is not an invert, it's a floorless coaster. It was a weird vibe,
and it's like the animation from 2001.
So like it's rocky. But one thing I thought was really funny is that it doesn't use the wheel covers, even though they're literally laid out on the transfer track. So it was awfully quiet for a Batman. You know how the Batman's like, whenever you have an invert, especially an old B&M invert, the roar of like the sound resonating in the wheel covers, because there's a big hollow wheel cover. It's always like wildly roaring, especially like I always have Magic Mountain in my head, but this one was really quiet. Like you couldn't really hear it from across the park. I mean, Magic Mountains you can hear it when you're literally 2 areas away. Kind of like Riddler, they're just loud rides.
I wonder if this one is filled, like if they filled this one with sand.
But this is the first prototype. Why would it do that?
Batman. Well, yeah, I guess I don't know, because
I just feel like the wheel covers not being on there, it just sounded a lot more smooth. Great ride. Almost too much for me to ride several times in a row.
Again, the time of day that we rode it, when we rode it the first time, the intensity factor was crazy. I felt like my feet were being ripped off, like
the Batman does.
Pool of blood at the bottom of my feet.
I mean, speak of intense inverts, right next door we got V2.
Yeah, Yankee Harbor is where it's at if you want inverted coasters that are going to, like...
Rip your feet off.
Yeah, rip your feet off. Expectations for V2.
I expected V2 to feel... I mean, again, we're talking prototype here. I mean, we haven't had a unique layout yet, but V2, I was expecting it to just kind of feel like Steel Venom. Nothing special in particular. I knew the holding brake wasn't there. One thing that did amaze me is the way it really sat on the midway. It is so snugly in there. Like, it is part of the area. Like, it is the area. Presence, the cool thing about these is that the towers are 200 feet tall, and they really stick out. Like, it's really obvious that it just hovers over the midway. And like any of them, I like the impulse coasters. I like, especially on the ones that only have one twisting spike. I like sitting in the front and seeing the whole twisting thing. Actually getting going, between the elements. They're sharp.
Like when we ride Wicked Twister, we always sit in the back to take advantage of the spiraling reverse spike. But then we usually only ride it like once, if ever. So on these impulse coasters, we take advantage of riding in the front seat, because the back seat doesn't really do a whole lot without the holding brake these days.
I mean, it ran a little rough, but overall, I'm a big fan of these coasters. I think there's nothing more entertaining than how sharp the incline is.
Oh, yeah, the force.
And how forceful it is. And then, like, just seeing the track rotate and looking to the side and seeing how high up you are. I like those rides, and this is no exception.
Development of the current generation of impulse coasters, like the one at, what is it? Is that a Sunac Park? Sunac?
It's Sunac Chongqing.
Yeah. They're double, like, they're...
Twin Dragon.
Flying Twin Dragon.
Something like that.
They're like, basically it's a Wicked Twister clone. That's what
but it's a little more optimized.
As, but it's like, it's amazing. It really shows, when you compare that ride to like V2, there was definitely forces and things that were engineered to be a little bit more smooth. Like the approaches into the twist and the way the twist gets tighter as you get up closer. Whereas with V2, I mean, they just hurl you right into the sharp little vertical incline, like, because they didn't know any better. They were just doing it. They were just doing what they knew how to do.
I think the nice thing about it is that the twisting spike faces the water ride, and it's over the water. Despite it really ruining the view that the log flumes originally had, I did like kind of how it shot you away from the park versus towards the park, which I feel like the other ones...
When I went in 2012, it was like the log flumes were practically invisible because of V2, but now, since Joker opened and they rerouted the midway to go to the left of Joker, you walk through into Yankee Harbor and you're greeted with this like lovely welcome of the elevated flume of Logjammer, or Logger's Run, excuse me, and then the lower flume area for the Yankee Clipper. So I feel like at least the flumes are now a focal point again to a degree, just because of the way the midway has shifted around the back.
Yeah, because you can see the Yankee Clippers like pre-lift and stuff. They're there too.
Yeah, the Yankee Clipper. The Yankee Clipper is the flume that's always closed. Like, they always have one open when it's warm, and it's usually Logger's Run. They don't run Yankee Clipper unless it's, like, really busy. But it kind of makes sense, because Logger's Run is a lot more Like that's a substantial bridge between major attractions. If you didn't have Loggers Run open, it would be no major rides between like V2 and Goliath.
Yeah.
Whereas Yankee Clipper is surrounded by major rides on all sides. Like it's like engulfed in major stuff. So like that's definitely one that eases the crowd like bulging, especially in the era of having Joker in that area. You've got Joker and Batman and V2 in the same plaza with Yankee Clipper. So that's like a great one to have open when you're trying to ease the crowds. But expectations for Loggers Run.
Well, based on the California Great America one, I would expect it to be a little bit better. Honestly, there wasn't much of a difference for me. It's not the best maintained attraction. It's very obvious that it was designed to interact with Yankee Clipper, and it...
You say Janky Clipper?
It sure looked janky.
An accidental joke. That was amazing.
So overall, I mean, it was wet, which is whatever.
Yeah.
I wasn't impressed with it. I don't really care as much. It's not polished. The one in California Great America, despite being routed through a water park underneath the non-existence of stealth, was still nicer than it was here. So, or Great America.
See, for me, I just love that this. I mean, obviously, this has retained the original layout and like the original aesthetic. Because California's Great America, the layout was changed dramatically to accommodate stealth, and then the water park grew around it. So by the time Great America and Santa Clara demolished their log flume, it really was quite a different ride than what the Santa Clara park has retained. One of the biggest issues I had was like somewhere along the way, the Santa Clara one had those big trough extensions like in the elevated portions where you couldn't even see over it. And that apparently was never an issue for Gurney, because I feel like we were up there, you really appreciate the view.
Yeah, it was cool.
So I feel like it was the stronger of the two, based on considering we got a ride on the Santa Clara one the year before. Yeah, it was
it was the same year.
Yeah, like they announced it would be closing in like a couple years, and I was a little disappointed in our ride because as a kid, like riding it with stealth in the mix was really cool. Like that's how I barely remember. I remember riding Yankee Clipper, but I feel like my early log jammer memories, like pre-stealth log jammer memories, were replaced by post-stealth log jammer memories, which were super memorable, obviously. But without stealth, it was just weird. So even though normally I would be mad that they demolished the log flume, I think it was time. And having Loggers Run and Yankee Clipper and Great America for in Gurney, and seeing that the rides are very well loved and maintained. Yankee Clipper was having maintenance performed on it. Like, it's definitely a ride that runs every year, even though it doesn't run every day. And the log ride had a line. People were into it. This park no longer has a shoot the chute ride. It was replaced by X Flight. They have a max splash battle that I think was a failed experiment because it was one of the few rides that we saw that was closed, and I think splash battles just aren't really catching on in the U.S. Dollywood's lasted 10 years.
Funny, because Buccaneer Bay looks great.
It looked great. And I think part of the reason it looks so good is because I don't think it's getting used as much. It doesn't have wear and tear. Because maybe it runs too...
It's still in a really harsh climate when it comes to...
Do you think it runs... I bet it doesn't even run like 2 months out of the year, and then... So
it's like kind of out of place having like a pirate theme in like that park, but...
So really... And now that the water park... is an admission, because it used to be included, but now they charge admission for the water park. It's like suddenly the log flume and the Yankee Clipper are like playing a very substantial role in this park. You've got the Rapids ride that's like missing in action. We don't know what the future is for the Rapids ride. Loggers Run is like wearing all of the water ride weight on its shoulders right now. So I think the park is really giving it its due.
I'm also pretty confident Yankee Clipper is going to open this year. It looked like it was ready to run. It looked like it had water running in it. They had staff
in the station when we were there.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that was probably going to open.
I wouldn't have been surprised. They didn't open it for 4th of July weekend. They got the train open, which is amazing. They had Condor open the day before, so that was awesome. But I wouldn't be surprised if they had Yankee Clipper running for like Labor Day weekend or some of these, summer weekends where all the kids are out of school. But we'll see.
Next,
moving on,
more big coasters.
Goliath.
Expectations, right?
Expectations for Goliath.
I expect Goliath to run about similar to Lightning Rod because of its size. I'm obviously not the biggest RMC person, but I do like the wooden coaster ones, and I like the trains that they run, with the older hardness style.
Yeah.
And I was expecting it obviously to be short, but short but sweet, which is kind of how I like my RMCs. I don't like them overly long because they can start getting painful after a minute.
Yeah.
So I really liked it. Expectations, were they exceeded? They were honestly probably just met.
They were met. Yeah.
I mean, this doesn't mean I don't like the ride at all. Like, I really like it. It's in my top 5 in the park.
I think you just had a very educated guess about how you'd feel about it, and it just goes to show.
I think the thing I like the most is that the elements that I was really excited for delivered, which is the overbank in the beginning of the ride. Because there is no RMC with an overbank like that. Nowadays, they either, if there's anything banked like that, it's going to be outward bank.
Yeah.
So having like a giant overbank turn, it's like 160 feet tall, was really cool. And then I really like the dive loop because Fun Spot Atlanta opens their RMC.
It was so crazy because we were literally riding it thinking about how I was like, this is one of the best RMCs because it has a dive loop. And then we saw the news that Fun Spot Atlanta was building the first Iron Horse with a dive loop. And I'm like, oh my God, finally.
The dive loop is really good. It's like Head Chopper City up in there. And
yeah, it's a beautiful
good.
ride.
And of course, the wooden RMCs have a lot of character. They have so much character.
Just like Lightning Rod and Outlaw Run for me, it was like every moment of Goliath counts.
And a parallel that Ian and I drew, like, as soon as we got off the ride, is this is their X2 in a way that you think about the layout where the station is so located kind of outside the ride plot, and then the ride does like a
little double out and back.
Exactly, like a double out and back with like a paper clip, and then it ends on the opposite corner of the plot, so it cuts through.
Yeah, the brake run
middle
dissects the middle,
like a diagonal line with the brake run into the
like
final.
The
brakes.
Raven turns, the fan turns, like it
was all very X2ish, and I really kind of appreciated that more.
It's literally wooden X2.
So wooden X2 is what I would rate it, which it's a good score.
That's extremely high praise. And then
speaking of woodies,
we've got. Speaking of wooden coasters, and also speaking of X2 Kindreds, our next 2 rides. We have American Eagle and X-Flight. So American Eagle expectations.
I expect it to be rough because big old wooden coasters are hard to maintain, and based on my experience with wooden coasters of a very large size, I don't know if I ever really love them. Because they often are not maintained the way they should be maintained. I mean, Racer doesn't run great at Kings Island. I heard it's running better this year, but we haven't been back this year.
And there's some good. I mean, like Racer 75 at Kings Dominion.
Racer 75 was good, but it was literally just remodeled and renamed.
It's just unless it's
Beast has been destroying me if I'm not sitting in a middle seat. Having said that, I liked American Eagle more than I thought I would. I still didn't love it, so it's not like in the top for me. It's probably bottom half. The layout is cool. I really enjoyed the giant helix, and I enjoyed how fast it really is. It is a really big ride. Like, it is bigger than I expected.
It's
where everything else is kind of smaller than I expected.
Flood lighting for the first drop that we saw when we exit, old school, classy.
So definitely can't miss ride. But when I have to talk about if I have 5 hours there and I have it's busy, then that's not what I'm going to wait in line for.
The pacing for it was pretty good.
Just getting to the ride is a freaking hike.
It's kind of unfortunate all the trimming that they've had to do to make the ride functional. It's one of those rides where you ride it and you're like, okay, this was amazing, but I bet it was killer on opening day.
Totally.
Because it trims you at the top of the helix, it trims you at the bottom of the helix, and then it trims you right before the last helix into the brake run. But having said that, it's like sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you have to find that balance of you don't want to completely neuter the ride, but you need to be realistic and set boundaries for your maintenance team and for your budget and be like, how can we make this ride still enjoyable and pleasant and not completely obliterate our maintenance budget and ruin the trains and so on and so forth. So also they were only running one side. The good news is they were running the blue side, which is the red side. The red side, which is the good side. We'll have to catch blue side on a return visit. But overall, just a neat ride, one that I think they're very proud of. People love to theorize if it'll be like RMC. I think that's just not going to happen. Not when you have Goliath literally right there.
I don't think there's a need for it. It runs well enough for it to not be one. So.
They would I think it would be much more likely that they got a single rail coaster from RMC than a Iron Horse.
I could see that.
Yeah. And anyways, so after that...
X-Flight.
I don't think we...
So, for those who've been listening to our podcast for a while now and read our articles, people generally, I think, know that I like wing coasters.
Yeah.
First, when they first got announced, I thought they were going to be fat and that they were just kind of gimmicky and, they may be forceless. I love my wing coasters.
What was your first wing coaster? Was it? Iron Dolly.
Iron Dolly? Yeah.
Iron Dolly?
It was Iron Dolly, right.
Yeah, it was Iron Dolly.
It
was Wild Eagle.
It was Wild Eagle.
And then we went and ate Holiday World, and we got Thunderbird.
Gatekeeper. Then we have all the ones in Asia.
But for us, it was the turning point was going to China and riding the 3 major wing coasters on our China trip, and it was like, wait a minute, we love these, especially Parrot Coaster. Like Parrot Coaster,
Gatekeeper is great,
and Gatekeeper is awesome.
This was my last
Phoenix
US one.
is fabulous.
Yeah, Phoenix is
now
awesome.
we're like trying to catch all of the major. Now we want to hit every wing coaster in Europe. We want to get them all, like
and all the Asian ones.
Yeah,
but yeah, so I
if
always
not
have,
every Asian one, at least every ride layout, because there's some clones.
Sure, but wouldn't hurt getting those.
Right.
But so what I was expecting was for it to be a good wing coaster, but based on its size, I was expecting it to be like lower end of the pack.
Because we really love Wings of Glory at HB World, which
similar size,
which I had already ridden
layout.
X-Flight, and I was like, oh, this is sort of like a evolution of X-Flight's layout. It has the same first 2. Well, it has.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. It has the same first drop. It has a loop, but then it has that same zero G roll and the Immelman.
It's just all a little different because Wings of Glory is much tighter. I wouldn't compare them besides size.
Yeah.
The layouts really aren't that
they
similar.
have like the same. They have a similar paint job too.
Yeah, okay. I mean, they're both red, but
I mean, for me, that's a lot for me.
Okay, great. So, get into the actual reality of it. Much more impressive than I thought. One of my favorites.
Right.
I think when it comes to the intensity, this is probably the most intense wing coaster I've done. More intense than Phoenix. And Phoenix is intense because it just throws a helix in the middle of the ride. That final helix after the roll, incredibly satisfying. It's really fast. The actual ride itself, they did a good job trying to tell a story. The queue is nicely manicured. There's landscaping. There's several near miss moments. I think the ride flows very well. And that's hard to get on a B&M wing coaster. There's always going to be moments where the train is wide and it has to circumnavigate under itself. And even Gatekeeper has awkward moments where it kind of hangs sideways or like it kind of shifts, navigates. It's kind of weird to get
Wild Eagle
itself.
is guilty of that in places.
Almost all wing coasters are guilty of this, but it was odd how incredibly satisfying X-Flight's flow was. Like the entire ride was just flowing the entire time, including that roll. It's a continuous roll from like through 3 elements.
It's the fan turn, and then the roll, and then it enters the helix, and it's like
one continuous roll.
It's like
the entire
so
thing.
fluid.
Really, really great.
Love the ride's aesthetic. It reminded us of X2. The color scheme, the kind of like secret government facility / kind of vibe, mechanics vibe.
Yeah, it was overall
obviously
really
the way the station is situated with like the double loading and the. Like, it just has a really nice presence.
And all of them obviously have the signature slow roll, because do you really have a wing coaster if you don't have a signature slow roll?
Dollywood.
But I think this is one of my favorite slow rolls because it just crossed the entire ride path. There was a lot of near-miss stuff.
Yeah.
A lot to look at. A really satisfying off-ride. This is the only one you can get really close to.
It has great presence.
Because all the other ones, they have the slow roll, but you're always kind of far away from it. It's more of like an on-ride experience.
Yeah, even Gatekeeper, the slower roll on Gatekeeper is not the easiest to photograph.
Gatekeepers even have like the complete flat roll, I guess. Like the real flat roll, there's only a few of them.
Thunder Eagle, Thunderbird, and...
Thunderbird, X-Flight, Wuji Sunax has one.
Parrot Coaster
has one. Those are the 4 that I've done.
Does Phoenix have?
No, Phoenix doesn't.
Phoenix doesn't even have it,
It's just a 0G roll.
And Banshee has it.
Right. Literally.
Inverted wing coaster.
Inverted wing coaster for real. But yeah, overall, really, really good. Way better than I expected. Completely slept on. I don't know why no one talks about that ride. It's like Gatekeeper, Thunderbird, and... Wild Eagle clock everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
But honestly, X-Flight needs to be in that conversation.
I mean, Cedar Point people talk a lot of shit about Gatekeeper, and I'm like, you guys will Cedar Point enthusiasts will gas up, like, the goofiest things, but they'll talk crap about Gatekeeper. I'm like, Gatekeeper is lit. I love Gatekeeper. Like, we love Gatekeeper. It's one of our favorite rides in Ohio. Do we sound like
old people being like, wow, we love wing coasters? I don't know, because I think what I like about wing coasters so much is that when you have a product line, the B&M Flyer is guilty of this. The B&M Invert is very guilty of this. The Floridas is even guiltier of this. Is they all run together. It's always the same show. It's always the same element, right? Which, I mean, I love my B&Ms, but the wing coaster is a new product, and we've ridden like 7 or 8 of these, and they're always different.
They all feel
they have like similar elements once in a while, but there's not one where I'm like, wow, it just feels like the other one. Every time I'm like, wow, great. Now I don't know what to rank this because this is really great. It's
with the exception of like literal clones, there's like...
There's 2 that are cloned, which is
it's only a China
thing. 2 Happy Valleys in
Yeah.
China that have
2
clones.
Happy Valleys, and then the Hot Go, wing coaster that was actually
cloned. One is abandoned and one is abandoned,
open and then the clone is the one that's open, the one at HB World.
So yeah, X-Fly, don't sleep on it. Make it a priority. Wait for it. Right in the back. I mean, obviously, I think wing coaster is the best in the back because you get to enjoy the wings in front of you doing all the things.
It's a feast for the eyes.
But yeah, definitely a really big fan of X-Fly.
And it runs
for me, probably.
It runs great. It ran. I remember when I rode it in 2012. It was still obviously it was brand new. It's so much better than I remember. I don't remember the forceness of, the helix. Forceful. I don't remember the really snappiness coming out of the Immelman in the back seat. Like this ride has aged beautifully. Like it has toughened up and just hauls. Like I couldn't believe how good it felt to ride.
I think X-Fly is the thing we rode the most. We rode it 5 times in 2 days. And maybe that and Raging Bull and Viper, I guess.
Yeah,
those
Viper
three,
technically we rode the most with 8 rides.
Yeah, true. But yeah, anyway,
the ride X-Flight is the ride that we stood in line for the most times.
Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to say is that X-Flight is, I mean, I'm looking at the fridge magnet here because we like it so much. It's one of those rides that you have expectations and no one ever talks about it. So when you get there, you're like, okay, I'm excited about it, but whatever. And it really, it stuck with me. It's one of those rides where, like, when I think of that park, I think X-Flight is one of the first things to think about.
Totally.
So, don't sleep on it. Go ride it. If you're there, don't skip it.
An expectation we had, actually not really, was
for Demon
to be open.
Oh, really? I mean, it was closed.
We knew that it wouldn't be open. So. It had been closed. I rode the Demon in 2012. It's wonderful. We love the one in Santa Clara. This ride's a gem. We'll have to come back and ride it because this Demon runs
Shockwave trains, which is
the Aero Mega Looper trains. This park loves this ride. Even though the ride wasn't open, you can tell that this park loves the ride. It is like one of their cultural reverence type attractions. When you walk through the midway that goes under the brake run, it plays the Demon song from 1980.
Which really looks like you're going backstage. It's kind of ghetto.
It is. I love it.
I'm glad you do.
Well. Screw you. You liked it too. It's just funny.
It was funny, but after a couple times walking there, you're like, why?
You're like, it's kind of wild.
Wait, this has been around forever. Why is this a little?
Yeah, it maybe.
Why does it look so temporary?
Yeah, like the asphalt. It definitely still feels like it was a service road that they repaved, and now it's a major artery for the park. But yeah, great ride. Obviously, the fact that this park has so many amazing coasters and this classic Aero Looper, like. The lineup for this, like for us, the lineup for this park is like, mind blowing. It's so incredible.
Well, yeah, what we said, and I guess we might as well say it now before we move on to the next ride, is that this park, it's one of those parks where their headliners, they kind of blend in on the global stage. They're not really like, none of their rides really spark interest.
Except for maybe Max Force.
Maybe Goliath and Max Force are really like their latest big boy rides. But on the, back in the day, Raging Bull was too, don't get me wrong, but I think the biggest thing about this park is that on average, every ride scores pretty high. It's one of those parks where, okay, yeah, it may not have like an incredible top 3, but everything on, the B-list artists or the B-list rides, they're all really good too. Like if you go down like the top 10 rides for me, when you get to ride number 11, you're still looking at a strong ride.
That's why we needed 2 days.
And then there's parks like Cedar Point where like, yeah, the top 5 is really great, but God, when we get to ride number 10 on that list,
falls off,
oh my God, I can't give a flying shit about this ride.
Yeah.
It's like, there are not that many great rides there. They get a really strong top, and everyone always like to focus on the top. But I think overall, I like to appreciate a lineup that's just strong all the way through, even if it means that they're not top heavy.
The overall,
they are just really good.
The substance of the overall coaster collection for Six Flags Great America is like virtually unmatched. It's
really strong.
It's comparable to I think Hershey Park is one of those parks where like their top 10 coasters.
Yeah, it's one of those parks
strong.
Like if it's really busy and you only get a chance to do 5 rides and you're uneducated, you still got on 5 good rides.
Right.
You didn't end up wandering into lines for shit that really didn't matter.
Yeah.
So big fan overall, of course.
Southwest Territory is super cool. It's a wonderful slice of what Time Warner was interested in and capable of. Even though the area doesn't have like Batman or Looney Tunes, like it's not Warner Brothers, they were really committed to creating a concise, complete environment that, and it was something that said like, we want to compete with Disney and Universal. We want to tell stories with the areas of the park. So that we spent a lot of time in the Southwest Territory. We rode Giant Drop twice. That ride has an amazing queue. I can't believe.
Giant Drop is really impressive because of its queue. It's
such a great presence. Oh my gosh!
I haven't seen a drop ride in the U.S. that isn't like a Disney ride that is so dedicated to theming. the whole queue was like a mine, and then there's switchbacks, there's another mine, and there's more switchbacks, and there's caves, and then you get to the actual loading platform. Really impressive. Great. I mean, every Intamin second generation drop ride, they're impressive. Yeah. This is one of those rides where like there's good and bad seats. So if you have a chance, sit in car 6. They're labeled per car.
We rode it twice.
So then you face the park.
And we got really good rides on both times. And it was wonderful.
So yeah, great ride. What really matters is the ride next door to it.
Yeah, Raging Bull.
So expectations. Based on what everyone's been telling me, including the person right across from me, that's you, is that it was going to be like a pretty mediocre hyper, and there really wasn't much airtime. It was kind of a waste. First of all, my expectations, am not as airtime centered. I mean, I love airtime, don't get me wrong, but if it's just airtime, then in my opinion, it's not even a complete ride, because I need something that does a little more than that. So I was kind of expecting. I had mild expectations. Like I wasn't expecting it to be slow and trash, but I also wasn't expecting it to like blow my mind. Expectation shattered.
And in my defense, the trim coming up the first airtime hill was so much worse when I rode it in 2012.
Was it, or was it how you remember it?
I just remember it like it really pulled you back, and you could feel where the airtime should be. But when we were riding it on this trip, we sat in the back and we got the floater air that we hungered for from that. When I rode it in 2012, there was no floater air on that.
But yeah, so reality for the expectation is that it's so much better than people give it credit for, than other people I've talked to mention it as. I think Raging Bull, yes, it is not Mako. It isn't trying to be Mako. This is back in the day when they were still trying to figure out what they want to do with it.
What is a hypercoaster?
What is a hypercoaster? Yeah. So back in the day, what is a hypercoaster? There was the whole B&M thing, the hyper twister. Yeah. It comes from something.
The formula was in the midst of being established, because you had Magnum, of course, and then the Morgan hypers followed that formula, but
they added
for every Morgan hyper that followed a formula, there was another kind of hypercoaster that didn't follow a formula, like Phantom's Revenge. Or Steel Phantom, I should say. Steel Phantom, Desperado, Pepsi Max Big One, Fujiyama. There were hypercoasters that were still kind of doing their own thing. Apollo's Chariot, a little more of an out-and-back formulaic thing, although still fabulous. And then Raging Bull feels so wonderfully 90s. It feels so wonderfully early B&M.
So yeah, back to my expectation versus reality here is that I wasn't expecting Mako, and I am really glad that I didn't get that, because at the end of the day, what I like the most about this ride is that it changed directions a bunch of times. Yeah, airtime is great, but like just doing out and back and just having only airtime moments, it's kind of repetitive. What I like is like Goliath of Wallaby Holland. I like there to be elements in there that are not airtime moments. So the great thing about Raging Bull is that you have several major airtime hills. There's some snappy airtime in the back. And then when you get to the mid-course, after you've changed direction 3 or 4 times, there is still several airtime hills after. Like the post-mid-course is quite substantial. And then it finishes with this super classic, very old B&M, giant figure 8. That's like a low to the ground. You just like skid off a drop.
That's like some Iron Wolf shit.
Yeah, you literally into a drop, and then you drop straight into this giant figure 8 in the infield. And honestly, it was addictingly good. I am obsessed with this figure 8. It's just funny because these B&M, you don't expect to ride a B&M hypercoaster. We've ridden a bunch at this point. And then to actually have something that's so substantial that no one ever talks about, that's actually such an identity of the ride, which is that figure 8 for me. So every time I ride that, I get like crazy excited at the figure 8. I'm like, yeah, we're going around and we're just doing like lateral stuff. And that's kind of why I'm starting to appreciate Goliath and Titan more.
Yeah.
Because, back when I lived next to Magic Mountain, that was my hypercoaster. It was like, well, God, I want more airtime. But now you ride a bunch of hypercoasters, you're like, wow, I really appreciate stuff that is more than just airtime, that's different.
Yeah.
So Raging Bull, definitely check that
special,
box. Very good ride.
Aged beautifully. That first drop.
We bought like the picture of us on the ride. And the whole picture
still one of the best first drops around. Just like Apollo's Chariot, except this one has the underground tunnel, which is really fabulous. So yeah, that ride, even for me, based on my previous rides, I was like, when I rode it before, I was like, okay, whatever. And then my expectations were shattered.
Everyone's always like, oh, Nitro is so much better. But from my experience, I thought this was way better than Nitro.
Dude, I've never had a ride on Nitro that was as good as our Raging Bull rides.
And we did it
on
like
this visit.
6
and we rode it like
times,
8 times. Yeah, it was crazy. Actually, what we rode 8 times was Viper. I think Raging Bull we did 6 times. But
so yeah, we're definitely on the side of the park
Viper. This is the side of the park that like really gets us going.
Earthquake and like some drifts came into the middle.
Excuse me.
Into the middle of the park, and the Superman Batman side of the park like mysteriously dropped into the earth. But for some reason, everything from Goliath to Max Force is still there. I'd be completely fine with that.
I mean, in fairness, Goliath is on that side of the park.
Okay, well, for me, that's part of the half moon. But I guess even if Goliath was off it, I'll still be pretty happy. Having said that, yes, Viper is another one of those rides where my expectations are really low. I come from Bandit. That was my first wooden coaster.
Yeah.
This is America's Bandit. Well, there are several American Bandits.
Well, this really, so the Stand Company, which designed this Cyclone clone for Six Flags Great America, would then 2 years later, or 1 year later, the following year, design one that basically Movie Park Germany, or Warner Brothers Movie World basically wanted a clone of Viper at Six Flags Great America. So the Bandit at Movie Park Germany and Viper at Six Flags Great America are true kindred spirits. They were the only two roller coasters, I believe, designed by this particular set of designers. It was the only roller coaster.
So it was like a full circle situation.
It was.
Bandit was my first wooden coaster. Little kid, it terrified me. Big boxy trains. To me, that was the biggest ride.
Yeah.
And then
both coasters are on 3-bench trains.
I'm a giant Six Flags Magic Mountain Viper fan to the point where I have a Viper tattoo. So I was just excited to ride another ride. It was called Viper, and then also it was like Bandit. And then, in all seriousness, it was a really good ride.
Fabulous.
It was one of the smoother wooden coasters that I've been on that runs the
super re-rideable.
The 3-bench PTCs. Layout is glorious. It's a lengthy ride. I like that you take a pretty lengthy walkway from within the Southwest Territory, and then
the ride is back there, and it's just so beautifully framed.
Yeah, and so you kind of just walk through the hills, and you make your way
Amazing
to this wooden coaster.
Of Raging Bull and Max Force.
Theming was decent for a wooden coaster. It was just overall a nice package, and it wasn't busy.
I loved all the props that had the Viper logo on them. We did little glamour shots with your tattoo.
I think the funniest thing is that everyone that was in the station was really into it. It was one of those rides where it felt a lot more cult classic-y.
And people
it felt a lot more like a local legend than I've ever heard anyone talk about it. Viper's always kind of passed to the side because
it was like people were like,
there's other rides there.
People were really into it.
Exactly, and we were into it too. So we're like, okay, this is dope. Like all these locals are over here chanting Viper Marathon.
And we're taking pictures of it, and people were coming off the ride saying we smiled for your picture because this ride's amazing.
Yeah, it was really weird how this is the ride that the coast enthusiast obviously doesn't give a whole lot of attention to, and I really was expecting it to ride it once and it was whatever. It was also called Viper, but we ended up riding it a lot. It was a favorite. Really enjoyed it. Smoothly rideable. My little slice of Bandit in the U.S. Really, really liked it. Again, one of those rides that I didn't really expect much from, but definitely shined on our trip. What's next?
All right, so
probably got Whizzer.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think we saved the last two, the best two for last. I mean, the two most important. My favorite coaster from my first visit to Six Flags Great America is the Whizzer. I probably oversold it, so I don't know what your expectations were.
You're probably sick and tired of my enthusiasm about all these rides at Six Flags America. At this point, Whizzer, hate to say it because I was kind of excited for it. I was really excited for it. I thought it was going to be the RCT dream come true. Whizzer was on my bucket list for years. It was honestly the main motivation for the park for a very long time for me. And to be honest, I loved it, but I didn't. No, sorry, I liked it, but I didn't love it.
Yeah.
We rode it several times, I think 3 times total.
Yeah.
Not even that much because the other rides just blew me away more. But I liked the idea of the ride a lot. But having ridden Revolution so many times, it just felt like a really small Revolution with inline seats that honestly wasn't that long. And though there were some intense moments, it wasn't a terrain ride. It wasn't very long. It wasn't very fast.
It's a terrain ride. It's topographically. I mean, it's not
much of a terrain ride as any ride in the flatland is, but
it's not that flat. I mean, it has some terraforming.
Okay, a little bit.
It has a ravine. It's got water and stuff.
If we call that a ravine, that's an insult.
Or not a
actual ravine.
I guess it's not like a ravine. It's a river. It has
There's
water.
water.
And trees
okay,
and shit.
sure, but that's not landscape.
And when you do that second dirt turn along the ground. And
okay, when I'm talking landscape, I'm talking Revolution landscape. I'm talking going up and down a hill.
Yes.
It was a fun ride. That's all I'm gonna say. I just didn't think it was all that great. I would ride it again. It's one of those local, one of those rides that really is super great in America. It's one of the last that is left. So I really appreciate it for that. But I guess I had really high expectations, and perhaps they weren't necessarily met.
That's fair. I mean, for me, it was a little slower than I remember. It sounds like a little locomotive chugging along when it's on the upper elevated turns. But God, it is just so precious and so cute and so unique. and it's like the satisfaction that I get from riding it is pretty much unmatched for most coasters. I just can't get over like the cuteness factor. It's just like literally darling.
It's very cute.
It's the cutest.
Feels like a hyped up mine train. Let's just say that.
It really,
it's a fun ride. But it's just we're talking about expectations versus reality. My expectations were really high, and just didn't necessarily meet them.
But anyway, so finally, the one that I was like really wanted to go to Six Flags for, and I was so worried that it would be down, but we got 4 rides on it. Had a great time riding this ride. Is Max Force. So obviously we've ridden a couple of air-powered coasters. We have Dol de Dompa under our belts. Like, what was your expectation for Max Force based on contemporaries like Accelerator, Top Fuel Dragster, Dol de Dompa, Powder Keg?
Accelerator, I was expecting a launch, obviously kind of like Dol de Dompa, maybe not quite as fast. And I was expecting a ride experience similar to Full Throttle. Probably because the track colors are so similar and the vibe it gives off is so similar. The location of the park is pretty similar. I kind of felt this was their Full Throttle moment. Having said that, obviously
their Full Throttle moment or their
Full Throttle. Yeah, because location, color, type of ride, everything.
Yeah, got you.
Shattered expectations again.
Yeah,
the launch was good. I mean, it wasn't amazing, but it was a really good launch. Like, it was
satisfying.
I liked it more than Dol de Dompa, I think, because Dol de Dompa's launch I was expecting more from because the records, but
it's a better ride than Dol de Dompa
of that launch
handily.
But what really surprised me is how massive the ride is. It is like the size of Raging Bull. Not quite as long because it doesn't do a bunch of stuff, but it is a really, really big ride.
Big ride.
In my head, I was expecting a much smaller ride.
It's like a hypercoaster.
I was expecting a Full Throttle kind of ride, but this ride really shoots you across the park.
In fairness, Full Throttle is quite big. It's probably we don't think about it as much as I think other people think about it.
Because Full Throttle's
got the one tall part. It's got the loop / top hat thing. This thing is a much larger.
Yeah. So Max Force has 2 really large structures. The first one being the butterfly loop that's like 2 inversions pretty much. And then it has the super high speed inline twist / hardline roll.
Which admittedly, after enjoying the Mosasaurus roll on Velocicoaster, the barrel roll is not as exciting or terrifying as it could have been. But
so the main difference on Velocicoaster versus Max Force with the roll is that Max Force's roll is that completely inline, hardlined. It is so
it really
smooth.
Keeps you in your seat.
I guess it's so part of the layout.
The ride just gently rotates around you.
Yeah, and even though you go really fast, and is I think still the fastest inversion in the world. It's really, really smooth. Yeah. But as well, Velocicoaster
like kicks you out of your seat when you're upside down.
Like the speed that you're in, and
like
then
a blue fire roll
to the side, like how stretched out the element is on Velocicoaster. That is a lot more like it actually kind of deposits you into the water almost. And then there's the final element, which is how do you describe it? It's almost like a 3/4 roll, and then you roll back, so it's still 2 inversions.
It reminds me a little bit of a lagoon roll.
I would have enjoyed it if it was a completely continuous roll, but that's because I just like the look of that. And then it slows down. The ride's not very long, but the fact that it does 5 inversions, some directional changes, and one of the fastest launches in the world, all with ultimate comfort. These trains are incredibly comfortable. Great ride. I think it's really one of those global stage kind of coasters that maybe due to the pandemic, not a whole lot of people have been giving it enough of a chance or time. But I think along with Goliath, those 2 rides really deserve a global stage. And what they've done. This is a fair fight against Cedar Point. Do I like it better than Maverick? I'm not sure, but it's a close call. Yeah. Is it better than Top Fuel Dragster? Absolutely.
Definitely.
No competition. Yeah. Max Force is so much better. Even people we're riding with were like, wow, it's so much better than
It's hard not to compare this park to Cedar Point, and honestly,
especially because of proximity.
Our 2 days at this park were better than any days that we've had at Cedar Point the last couple of years. So,
and we like Cedar Point.
And we love Cedar
Point. People think we're shit on it, but I think Cedar Point is so incredibly hyped up, and I'm not afraid to be like, well, I've had
incredibly overrated that it's like, even though we like it, we're like, you guys, like, you need to. The expectation and the reputation are just not matching up with Cedar Point right now, and it hasn't for the last couple of years. Even in 2019, it wasn't quite there. The first thing I thought when we rode Goliath was like, I like this better than Steel Vengeance. This is a better ride for me than a ride like Steel Vengeance. And I felt that way with a lot of rides that we rode at Six Flags Great America. I'm like, okay, I like this a little better than like the version that's the Cedar Point like counterpart of this ride. Obviously, there's not a lot of like, not everything is like an even tit for tat comparison, but even though Cedar Point is larger and technically more polished, and like we'd be lying if we said that our Cedar Point visits in the last few years were better than this 2-day visit to Six Flags Great America.
Cedar Point is more polished, but I think Six Flags Great America's overall ride lineup, if I had to choose like, wow, what could I visit every day for the rest of my life, is really extreme, but I would probably pick Great America because I think the amount of rides that I really enjoy versus the amount of rides that I really enjoy at Cedar Point, I enjoy almost every ride at Great America.
Also,
more than
Six Flags Great America feels so much more relaxed. It's amazing. You just waltz right on to Max Force, wait 15 minutes for Max Force.
We were lucky though, because that park does get really busy. Their annual attendance for how shortly they're open is 3.1 million.
But it's just crazy. You can't get on Steel Vengeance without waiting like 2.5 hours. Like Cedar Point, like it's so the rides that people care about at Cedar Point, it's so stacked that like everybody goes to like.
Well, yeah, because you'll have a 2.5 hour wait for Steel Vengeance, but then like Cedar Creek, Mine Train, Iron Dragon.
Yeah, there's a bunch of rides that are walk-ons because people don't care about them because.
But at least at Great America, every ride is a little more cared
balanced.
About. Yeah. So perfect balance, great amount of rides, even though there's
so much character.
Some clones. Lots of character. I mean, it can definitely use a bit of cleaning up.
There's some paint.
It's
and
very
some
Six Flags, you know. In a way, they're still like, wow, this is definitely ran by Six Flags because half the buildings can really use a little bit of TLC. But overall, when we're talking ride lineups, really, really enjoyed the park. Definitely look forward to returning. And like next year, if we're going to ask myself, hey, are we doing a quick 2-day trip to Cedar Point? Or are we doing a quick 2-day trip to Great America?
I'll probably pick
Great America.
I can't wait to see what Great America does next. I mean, they have had a really strong decade.
Stream spinner, please.
They've had when you consider X-Flight, Goliath, Joker, and Max Force being like the coasters of their 2010s, like that's pretty strong. That's better than any Six Flags parks 2010. And right up there with like what Carowinds got.
It's impressive. They got X-Flight, Goliath, and Max Force all within a couple years. That's pretty good.
And Joker, and
the Dark Ride, pretty major Dark Ride.
Yeah.
So
and the world's tallest Larson Loop,
and the world's tallest raft water slide.
Oh my God, their water slide, the Tsunami Surge.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Looks incredible. We didn't do the water park thing, but man, it really looks lovely next to Max Force. I mean, these rides are like
two really powerful
couple.
Big rides.
They have a fabulous presence.
Overall, if I had to kind of bring up California's Great America real quick to round up this podcast episode, because we're kind of over time already.
Right.
California's Great America, their coastal lineup is nothing compared to Six Flags Great America.
Right.
California's Great America, however, is much more polished. If I really just hanging around the park, atmosphere-wise, I prefer California's Great America. Six Flags Great America has an incredible ride lineup. I can get tired of those rides, and so if I had to pick, obviously based on attractions, it would be an obvious Six Flags Great America choice. Both have their strength. It's just really fun to see which direction one park went in, and their historical struggles and their triumphs, and then the same for the other park. And so that was really, really great about that trip. So I look forward to going back to both parks again and kind of, having both in my in my mind.
I'm curious to see the future of like what the future holds for California's Great America. I hope they keep. There's still some areas of the park that could use some fleshing out. It's so great that they finally got the water park expansion that they deserved. I'm curious the big plot between like the food court and Railblazer. There's still lots of potential for California's Great America. Whereas with Six Flags Great America, it feels like it is packed, and there's just no telling what their next move will be.
Another thing that's really fun about that park is going there and seeing how tightly packed everything is. It's like, wow, how the hell did they fit V2 in here? Or wow, Batman,
Batman, the Yankee Harbor, like the Batman Joker V2.
And then you see X-Flight, and it's like, wow, they really wedged X-Flight onto the midway, but also the Helix is like between the corkscrews of Demon. Like, it's really, really impressive.
Or like Goliath. I can't believe they fit Goliath into that incredibly narrow plot. I mean, they worked miracles at this park. It's really amazing. We had a great time. We really look forward to revisiting again. We have the Six Flags Parks ranked article right now. You can see where Six Flags Great America ranked for us among the 15.
And then there's a more detailed recap of our visit to Six Flags Great America live on thecoastagames.com.
Lots of pictures and analysis.
Check out the pictures, kind of, enjoy some of our photography. And, of course, enjoy our upcoming episodes. We'll be hopefully live recording next week or in 2 weeks, depending on when this launches, with Sven in Belgium. And then we look forward to covering all those parks.
Okay.
All right, you have a great day. Bye.
Bye.